off of what we talked about earlier, not today, but last week, and that is Metroid Dread. For some reason, has been the topic of conversation regarding games, journalists, and even people among the industry. Don't get me wrong, most people that I know that played it, that are long and lifetime Metroid fans, fucking love it. I've seen individually, definitely people that I know personally, there's nothing bad that they've said about the game. But games journalists who have been having trouble, and among other people that are in the industry, have said that they've been very critical of it, and it all stems from, again, the accessibility. Let's read this. It's come from Game Rant right here, and it says, and I quote, God of War's, in fact, let me see if I can get this just a little small to help you guys out. Here we go. God of War's David Scott Jaffe criticizes Metroid Dread's design. I'm just going to call him David. David shares heated criticism on Metroid's intrinsic design with regard to a dizzied exploration and lack of visual cues. Metroid Dread has been met with mixed acclaim since its launch. Some players suggest Metroid is the best 2D series, which, again, that's what I've heard more of that, to be fair. While other fans have invited discourse to whether 2D Metroid title is worth the modern price point. Okay. I can see that. Regardless, it seems like Metroid Dread also serves as a refresher and reintroduction to the franchise for newcomers. Metroid Dread opens with a long brief exposition before ZDR can be fully explored through teleportals and other methods of transport and a terrace onward. But one significant name in the video game industry has recently voiced their dissatisfaction with Metroid Dread, citing its environmental progression as a poor design choice. Though his own words are much more colorful. Let's see what he's had to say. And this is coming from David Scott, who is known for his work as a designer and director for the original God of War, which I guess that has to give him some sort of credibility, to be fair. And that is sure to rub some fans the wrong way. This is not because he's necessarily right or wrong in his opinion, but because his opinion criticizes a design feature that is prevalent in many 2D Metroid titles that have massive fan base. Jazz's critique on Metroid Dread's design boils down to the concept of environmental blocks being hidden from the player with no visual indication of where to progress. So because you have to memorize things, he says he depicts the instance that bothered him the most from his own live stream of Metroid Dread. And in the sequence, David Scott is completely unsure of where to go next, and a chat member in his streams guides him to a specific room where he must fire upon an unassuming ceiling. Infuriated, he calls this design Bush League and unacceptable game design. Ultimately, he believes fan nostalgia blinds them from the game's otherwise questionable design ethics. Now, this much I will say. Yes, nostalgia is a real thing. And I've seen it with Marvel. I've seen it with DC, where you got people blinded to something being mediocre, to something being bad, to something being stupid. But because they are intrigued by do this nostalgia baiting, they will either give it a pass. I understand it. I can empathize with that. However, he said spent hours trying to shoot enemies above, below, because of course you can do that, because why would enemies be there if the game didn't want to guide your eye to attack there to expose blocks? But these, for some magical reason, do not break. I wish I was hardcore enough to explain why. That's why I harp on this, is because I value honest discourse and discussion. And while I am 100% am not good at most video games, I do understand game design. When I have gamers not apply logic but nostalgia, emotion to design discussions, that's hard not to push back. So there's a complaint here. And again, I don't think that's necessarily unlike what we've seen in previous Metroids and what we've seen in like 2D games in the past, where sometimes if not oftentimes, the game doesn't help you figure shit out. That's the whole idea of the exploration aspect, is to go around and it's not going to be a visual cue telling you need to do this. And I can understand why someone would say that's quote unquote bad game design, but that's if you're more looking at it from a modern sense. And that is that, we live in an age of like these quick time events and everything. You basically, everything's a walking simulator and everything is holding your hand. And I've told y'all before, I look at video games and I look at that as more so the downfall of video games because of that. We have games that to me are too easy. The equivalent to a normal game now is very easy in the past in comparison. I'm not that fond of that, but that's kind of been stemming from, okay, everybody needs to be able to get past the part. And to be fair, David Scott, unfortunately, is really exacerbating that idea. He's really amplifying it, unfortunately, because he's looking at it like, I can't figure it out, therefore there's something wrong here. Yes, there are objective metrics, and look, he's a fucking game designer. He knows a little something about something. But there are objective measures that you can look at and you can determine where something is bad or good. Yes, that is certainly there. There are measurable things that you can look at. However, looking at how this 2D scroller, or rather how Metroid works and how it has worked, this not only is not unlike something, it's almost like core to that kind of genre in that regards. And I like these guys say here in the Gamer Rant, article, some fans have argued Metroid Dread informs players of this design feature in its opening tutorial sequence. Indeed, longtime 2D Metroid players may already have this mechanic ingrained in their muscle memory, but perhaps, again, David Scott is less familiar with the franchise and environmental obscurities. But it is true that endless areas and chambers can blur in the player's memory, and tiny environmental interactions may be difficult to locate when being overwhelmed by the grand scale of Metroid's global map. So it's like, well, some individuals can and some individuals can't. That to me right there, and that statement, that concept represents modern gaming and represents my issue with it. And that is that we get to a point to where some folks hit a wall with a certain game, right? Other people can play it fine. Some others can't. And if they can't, whether it be they're not used to it, it's not their style of game, they don't understand it, or they just simply lack the mental capacity to be able to achieve and accomplish. Unfortunately, in modern gaming, that is treated like a threat. And that is treated like something is wrong, as if every single individual is under some sort of obligation to be able to complete every aspect of a game without any struggle, or with minimal struggle, let's say that. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I do believe that there are certain gaps that are maintained through certain genres of games in terms of skill, in terms of understanding, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying that just because I would maybe understand it. No, I'm saying that because I'm not arrogant enough to believe that there's something wrong with the game itself in the event that I, despite everybody else, or rather a big group of people being able to achieve something, I can't do it, right? There are bad game mechanics. There's cheesing. There's all these sorts of other concepts that make it a problem. We can look at it like that, but that's not what we're talking about. I play competitive games all the time. You see me on playing online games all the time. And yeah, I know it's a different genre, but it's the same concept. If I get beat by someone that's better than me, you'll never hear me gripe. I'll gripe if some bullshit happened. That's what I gripe about. But if I get just beat and outpaced, it's like, all right, well, guy scored a good goal. Great. I'll move on. It's no big deal. Some people don't have the humility to be able to do that. So they immediately blame something faulty with the game. And this is why you have these games that are one size fits all, that are mundane gaming experiences, because they're trying to encapsulate really just everybody, and really have something there for everybody, which means they have to dumb it down and they're kind of appealing to the lowest common denominator, right? But I continue to hear things. I didn't plan on really. Metroid was one of those games. Metroid Dread was one of those games. Just like all the other Metroids, I get to it when I get to it. I'm almost wanting to play it and not play it on stream because I'm hearing stuff like this. We read that article, Mashable article, where the game reviewer, games journalist was so distraught with the game because it was so difficult and that person couldn't change the difficulty. Like, that makes me intrigued. It's like, okay, I want to play that shit now. If y'all can't beat it and the game's not apologizing for being somewhat difficult or somewhat of a, which is, again, it's Metroid, right? Somewhat having puzzles and memorization concepts, patterns that you have to kind of, you're going to inevitably lose at some point in order to master those. I love those types of games. Y'all know that. People that watch me stream know that that I love those types of games, but I appreciate it now more than I ever had before because unfortunately a lot of games are not doing that. They're appealing to the lowest common denominator, making mundane games, trying to appease the widest demographic because they're catering to the demographic of games journalists and weirdos who simply don't have the reaction speed, mental capacity, or whatever it is. They just lack. And they can't complete something, so they think every game should be made with that person in mind. I, of course, disagree with that. I believe that instead of trying to be the master of none, be good at whatever it is that you get, like we see out of the Soul series. And I'm not saying just because of those being generally difficult. Soul series, Born series, you look at those games are what they are. There is no changing it in terms of like difficulty in that regard. They're just what they are. And if you can't beat it, the old phrase is get good. But that's not a troll phrase. It's a game in terms of that's what the game's about, right? It's a concept of that's what it is about. And if you can't do it, that's your damn fault. That's not the fault of the game, and it's certainly not the fault of the other part of the audience, which had been able to complete it.
You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.